Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to welcome you to this session of the World Knowledge Forum. We are honored to join you, leaders, innovators, and change makers from across the region and around the world, as we explore organizations and how they build resilience and shape a better future. I will first introduce our speaker and then join her in a fireside chat. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Anne Corona, Chief Executive Officer of Enterprise Clients and Global Chief Commercial Officer for Aon, and a member of our executive committee. Anne leads Aon's work with large multinational organizations, bringing together risk capital and human capital solutions to help clients thrive in a complex world. With nearly 25 years at Aon, Anne has partnered with clients across Asia Pacific, the United States and beyond, always with a focus on building resilience and driving sustainable growth. She's also a champion of inclusive leadership, helping us attract and develop top talent to deliver distinctive outcomes for our clients. Please join me in welcoming Anne.
Thank you, Craig. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is an honor to be here with you today at the World Knowledge Forum, a gathering that continues to shape global dialogue on innovation, resilience, and leadership. Please allow me to begin with a story. Not of crisis, but of transformation. Earlier this year, a leading global manufacturer found itself at a crossroads. With operations spanning Asia, Europe, and the Americas, the company had long been a symbol of industrial stability. But as geopolitical tensions escalated, climate disruptions intensified, and AI-driven competitors emerged, the company faced a stark reality. Its legacy operating model was no longer fit for purpose. Rather than retreat, it chose to reinvent. The company restructured its supply chain to prioritize agility over scale, embedded predictive analytics into its risk management framework, and launched a workforce transformation initiative to upskill and reskill employees for a more digitized and decentralized future. Most notably, it established a cross-functional resilience council, a permanent body tasked with scanning for emerging risks and coordinating rapid response across business units. This company's journey is not unique. It reflects a broader imperative facing organizations today: to build resilience as a proactive strategy for growth. At Aon, we see this transformation every day. As a global professional services firm, we help clients make better decisions by navigating volatility across risk, retirement, health, and talent. From advising on climate resilience and cyber threats to optimizing workforce and retirement strategies, our work sits at the intersection of data, insight, and action, precisely where resilience is forged. Resilience is not built in a vacuum. It is built in response to pressure, and today that pressure is coming from every direction. Economic uncertainty, geopolitical fragmentation, technological acceleration, weather extremes, and workforce evolution. These forces are not isolated. Trade, technology, weather, and workforce are interconnected megatrends, each amplifying the others. So, the question before us is not just how to withstand disruption, but how to adapt, evolve, and thrive in its midst. Let's take a closer look at the terrain we are navigating and how organizations are responding with clarity, agility, and foresight. Across boardrooms in Seoul, Sydney, San Francisco, and beyond, executives are telling us something loud and clear. The nature of risk has changed. It is no longer about isolated threats. It is about interconnected, accelerating, and often invisible forces that ripple across borders and sectors. A 2025 survey of Aon clients, with nearly 3,000 executives from 63 countries participating, revealed that cyber risk tops the list of current concerns globally. That's not surprising. Cyber attacks are faster, more sophisticated, and increasingly entangled with geopolitical tensions. When we look at the Korea dataset, what is striking is what leaders rate next: economic slowdown and business interruption. These are not just operational headaches, they are strategic threats. And when we ask leaders in Korea to look ahead 3 years, the picture shifts a bit. Cyber jumps 5 spots, and work injuries remain toward the top of the list. It's a clear signal. The future of risk is not just about protecting assets. It's about protecting trust, talent, and transformation. This evolution reflects a broader global pattern. Interconnected risks are compounding, cascading, and becoming systemic. This is why resilience today is about building adaptive capacity. It is about designing systems that bend without breaking, that learn and evolve, and that turn disruption into direction. As we map this risk landscape in which cyber threats, economic slowdowns, and supply chain disruption dominate the boardroom agenda, it becomes clear that many of these pressures do not originate within a single country or industry. They are shaped by something broader, more volatile, and often harder to predict: geopolitics. Today, risk is not just about what is happening inside our organizations. It is about what is happening among organizations and across borders. We are living through a period of strategic fragmentation. The global trade architecture that once promised efficiency and scale is now being redefined by tariffs, sanctions, and changing alliances. Aon's 2025 research found that geopolitical volatility and the impact of trade realignment or regulatory changes continue to rank as top risks globally and within this region. In Korea, this is especially palpable. Leaders here, according to our survey, rank supply chain disruption, regulatory change, and business interruption among their top concerns. The country is exposed to both the volatility of global trade and the complexity of regional diplomacy. It is about what governments do and the pace at which they do it. One change in government policy can impact procurement, compliance, and even talent mobility. Encouragingly, however, leading organizations are not just bracing for impact, they are repositioning with intent. We are seeing firms build regionally diversified supply chains to hedge against concentrated risk. Organizations are revisiting contracts, adding flexibility to pricing, dispute resolution, and force majeure clauses, so they can respond to shocks without unraveling operations. And they are rethinking their energy strategy, not only for ESG compliance, but for geopolitical resilience. Japan's outbound investments in Vietnam and India, for example, are not just about growth. They are about securing strategic autonomy. Leading firms need the ability to anticipate, absorb, and adapt to trade and geopolitical complexity without losing momentum. It is not about predicting the next crisis. It is about designing sustainable systems that can thrive in any crisis. As organizations recalibrate their geopolitical strategies, redesigning supply chains, renegotiating contracts, and rethinking energy dependencies, another force is reshaping the operating landscape just as profoundly: technology. Innovation is accelerating, and in some cases, outpacing our ability to govern it. Aon's research is clear. Technological disruption is one of the most powerful and paradoxical forces in today's risk landscape. It is a source of exponential opportunity and exposure. On one hand, we are seeing frontier technologies like AI, biotechnology, and climate tech scale at unprecedented speed. AI alone is projected to reach $4.8 trillion in value by 2033. It is already transforming logistics, diagnostics, and decision-making. Across Asia, AI is being deployed in manufacturing, legal services, and even disaster response and recovery. However, this is the tension. The faster we innovate, the more complex the risks become. So, what does resilience look like in this context? It is about governance, agility, and inclusion. Leading organizations are building AI ethics frameworks, not just to comply with regulation, but to earn trust. They are designing digital infrastructure that is secure, scalable, and regionally adaptable, especially as trade fragmentation forces companies to localize. As we accelerate into this new technological frontier, where AI, automation, and digital infrastructure are reshaping how we operate, there's another force we cannot predict with precision: the weather. While we are building smarter systems, the natural systems around us are becoming more volatile. Climate change continues to be a megatrend. Extreme weather events, floods, wildfires, extreme heat, drought, and typhoons are testing resilience in real time. These are not distant threats. They are happening now, and they are happening everywhere. In the first half of 2025, insured losses from weather-related disasters exceeded $100 billion globally. In Asia, we have seen record-breaking rainfall in Korea, heat waves across Japan, and wildfire risks intensifying in Southeast Asia. These events can cause compound disruption. They can result in the loss of life, trigger supply chain delays, result in infrastructure failures, and insurance volatility. Aon's research highlights this clearly. Weather risk is no longer considered episodic. It is endemic. In Korea, executives are increasingly ranking weather and natural disasters among their top concerns, not just due to the environmental impact, because of its ripple effects on business continuity, capital allocation, and reputational risk. How do companies achieve resilience in this context? It is about anticipation, adaptation, and integration. Leading organizations are embedding weather modeling and advanced analytics into operational planning, capital allocation, investing in climate-resilient infrastructure, and adopting carbon accounting frameworks that align with both regulatory and investor expectations. Vietnam's direct power purchase agreement and Indonesia's renewable energy push are not just policy. They are strategic hedges against volatility. Resilience here means designing for disruption. It means treating weather as a core input to strategy. While we cannot control the weather, we can shape how we respond to it. And that brings us to the most dynamic force in any organization: people. Resilience is not just built in infrastructure or algorithms. It is built in teams, in talent, and in the capacity to adapt. Right now, that capacity is being tested. Aon's research shows that demographic shifts and talent scarcity are reshaping the global workforce. Across Asia, executives are increasingly concerned about talent shortages and reputational risk, not just as HR issues, but as strategic vulnerabilities. The skills needed to thrive in this new landscape, including analytical thinking and tech fluency, are evolving faster than traditional education and training systems. By 2030, nearly 4 in 10 core skills will change. A redesign mandate is required. So what are leading organizations doing? Well, they are moving from job-based models to skills-based ecosystems. They are investing in lifelong learning and development, not just onboarding. They are designing inclusive, flexible work environments that support well-being across generations. They are using AI not just to automate, but to augment, optimizing talent acquisition, engagement, and development while maintaining critical human oversight. This is not simply workforce planning and upskilling. It is workforce transformation as a growth driver. It is about empowering people to thrive in complexity, not just survive it. So, where does this journey take us? The megatrends we explored, the fragmentation of trade, the acceleration of technology, the volatility of weather, and the transformation of the workforce do not operate in isolation. They are deeply interconnected, shaping and amplifying one another in ways that demand not just awareness, but action. Trade tensions and geopolitics reshape supply chains, which in turn influence workforce models and technology deployment. Weather volatility disrupts operations, infrastructure, and food production, but also accelerates innovation in climate tech and renewable energy. Technology, while transformative, requires a workforce that is ready, resilient, and ethically empowered. This is the complexity we face. It is also the opportunity we share. Resilience today is about managing risk and mobilizing potential. It is about designing organizations that are not only prepared for disruption, but capable of evolving beyond it. It is about leaders who do not react to change, but anticipate it to drive it with courage and with collaboration. As we build resilience, our call to action is one, to build strategies that reflect the interconnected reality of our world. Not siloed responses, but integrated solutions. 2, to invest in technology that are inclusive and ethical, not just efficient. And 3, to empower our people, not just to adapt, but to lead. It is critical to treat resilience not as a defensive posture, but as a creative force, one that enables us to navigate complexity with confidence and to co-create a future state which is not only more secure, more just, and more innovative. Resilience is a competitive advantage in a volatile world. Thank you. Thanks so much. And Craig, welcome. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for joining me today on stage to discuss building resilience in a complex risk landscape. Craig advises clients headquartered in Asia Pacific with complex global operations. And Craig, you have spent the majority of your career here in Asia. Can you please share a little bit more about yourself and your role supporting global corporations in Asia and beyond?
Yeah, sure. And well done, thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. I've been in the business for almost 25 years, so not quite as long as you, but very, very close. I have a background in risk consulting and data analytics, but I've worked across our business, our risk capital business and our human capital business. I've worked across 3 continents for the firm, and at the moment, as you say, I'm responsible for our most complex clients. So our clients that are headquartered in Asia Pacific, but operate in a truly global environment.
That's great. So Craig, how are businesses in this region, in Asia, changing the way that they think about resilience? And what does resilience mean for these organizations today?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is organizations moving from much more of a reactionary posture to one of much more preparedness. As these risks evolve and as the landscape transforms so dramatically, we're seeing them taking action. And some of the more formalized actions we're seeing is an increase in scenario planning. So really allowing these organizations to imagine a future which they haven't done for some time. So it's effectively spurred them into action as these rules and risks change so dramatically in the region. I think supply chains, you touched on it, supply chains are a key part of resilience. How organizations get their products and services around the world to their customers is ever more important. And then I think finally, we're seeing success coming from the combining of leadership teams with risk management. So integrating risk management much more into an elevated state within the organization, but also combining that with workforce agility. So effectively focusing on inclusive leadership and trust.
That's great. And thank you for framing all of those four megatrends and how we're seeing that with Asia headquartered companies. How have you seen the trade fragmentation and tariffs impact companies within the region? And how are trade policy shifts influencing long-term investment decisions?
I think we're all quite aware of the diversification of organizations. So we've seen a significant operational shift from China into, I guess, the winners are a lot of Southeast Asian nations. So we've seen significant investment in the Philippines, in Indonesia, and of course Vietnam you mentioned earlier, but also India being a big winner as a new manufacturing and operational growth engine for the region. But I would also say, and this has been going on for some time, Korean, Taiwanese, and Japanese organizations have been investing significantly into the US under previous regimes, but now increasingly significant investment sums, actually eye-watering sums that we've seen being announced, particularly coming from Korea into the US, and perhaps with some surprising results over the last week to the reactions to those investments. I would also say that these decisions are now influenced heavily as an opportunity to hedge risk. So, supply chains are one thing, but operations broadly, geopolitically, I heard yesterday in a session the term friendshoring. So effectively, supply chaining, if you like, with geopolitical allies, as opposed to necessarily geographical supply chain reorganization. And then I think using data to forecast some of these opportunities. So where in fact are we going to reskill? Where in fact are we going to land our new operations and being able to understand the implications of that? And then finally, just on your policy question, I think trade policy in the past has been very much a compliance issue. But again, once again, now it's been elevated. We're seeing it increased into the enterprise risk registers of organizations, being elevated into top risks for organizations.
Yeah, and given this top risk, how and as we think about global trade changing so quickly, how are the Asian companies making their supply chains more efficient and resilient, to which I referred earlier? If you could share some of the practical steps that you see organizations in this region taking, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think we see most organizations starting with contracts. So, and you touched on this earlier, force majeure, dispute resolutions, being able to absorb shocks in a more systemic way. So contract updating, if you like. Political risk insurance has seen a rise and increase of application, within this region, but all over, I would say, all over the world. And that's really designed to help absorb some of these sudden changes, but also as a hedge for currency issues. We're seeing it being applied in that particular situation. And then maybe more of, I guess, an extreme example is where Aon, in fact, was able to pool a significant amount of capital in the Ukraine to be able to set up a war risk policy to effectively jumpstart investment in construction and reconstruction, particularly in the healthcare and infrastructure environment within the Ukraine. So those policies are actually operating at the moment. We've actually, interestingly, not seen a claim on those policies, but what it's done is it's effectively attracted capital back into the country as it rebuilds its effort domestically. And then I would say once again, data and technology. So the ability now, and particularly with the inclusion of AI, the ability to understand and predict risks is helping organizations be a lot more nimble and flexible as to how they effectively change and move those operations and supply chains.
That's great. That's great.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to flip the question back to Anne now. And I touched on technology there for a moment, and I mentioned AI, and it's obviously been a huge theme for us at this event over the last couple of days. So as companies use more advanced technologies like AI, they're naturally introducing more risk into their ecosystems, into their organizations. So how can they better manage these risks while still moving forward?
Yeah, well, great. Well, as companies adopt more advanced technologies like AI, it is critical to remember that technology is an enabler. It is not the end goal. And so frequently, organizations fall into the trap of treating AI as the solution in search of a problem. Another way to think about it is the hammer looking for the nail. And so it's critical that companies start with the outcome that it wants to achieve, and then work backwards to determine the type of technology that will enable it to get there, right? Rather than starting with the technology. And then when you think about risks, there are really two different categories. So first, amplifying the existing risks, and two, new and emerging risks. So from an amplified existing risks, AI can amplify challenges like cybersecurity, data privacy, and regulatory compliance. And from an emerging risk perspective, we need to be aware of model biases, explainability, and the ethical use of data. So for example, cybersecurity continues to be a concern, and it is a growing concern, particularly as data flows across borders and devices. Vulnerabilities continue to increase and to multiply. So Aon's 2025 Global Cyber Risk Report found a 29% increase in reported cyber incidents in 24 compared to 23, and these are already elevated levels. So it just underscores the importance and urgency around the awareness of these risks.
And maybe I'd just add that 29% increase in effectively in cyber threats and incidents has resulted in a 22% increase in insurance claims. And insurance claims obviously need to get funded in some way. Either you're retaining that risk or you're transferring it or financing that risk. Ultimately, that's going to impact the bottom line for organizations.
But I think organizations in Asia and internationally continue to consider how they can transfer that cyber risk and continue to explore technology E&O insurance and cyber insurance. So if I may go back to risks and preventable opportunities, at Aon we've taken a really pragmatic approach. So rather than build a separate AI governance structure, we've embedded AI oversight into our existing risk framework. We felt that would allow us to scale responsibly and remain more agile. Because technology is advancing at an unprecedented pace, and so we must have governance that can evolve with it. And we think about it in three different buckets. So first, capability building. Second, governance evolution. And third, change management. So capability building, that is around developing new tools and models and what our colleagues utilize to support our clients and to serve one another. The governance evolution, so as I mentioned, adapting frameworks to manage these new risks. And change management, not to be forgotten. So we must bring people along on this technology journey. It's critical. And what we found is you can't invest in one of the three over the others, because if you do, you'll likely face friction. And what we have realized is success happens when you balance all three. And we've talked about this a lot, Craig. Innovation is not just technical, it's cultural, and that's when it can really make a difference in an organization.
Okay, fantastic. And so, maybe thinking about sticking with a little bit of that theme. So, we're seeing a significant investment in advanced manufacturing and infrastructure in this part of the world, but globally, of course. So I guess bringing in that cultural piece a little bit, how can you see organizations using technology responsibly and stay competitive and move forward?
Sure. Well, it's been a constant theme throughout the forum. We all recognize that AI can enhance workforce productivity. It can also strengthen health outcomes and how well and healthy our colleagues are, and can mitigate risks if used effectively. So I've spoken about the potential increase in risk, but it's also important to recognize that it can help reduce risk if utilized effectively. AI and technology can enable humans and people to make better decisions, so long as you're not replacing them fully. At Aon, we call it AI with humans in the loop, so we don't separate fully. It's really critical to be transparent, right? I spoke about trust and the importance of transparency, but transparency is really key. So organizations must build trust by being transparent about how they're utilizing technology and how different teams are being utilized in decision making, not only with their colleagues and their people, but also customers. And it's really, it cannot be forgotten how critical it is to abide by local rules. So organizations must adapt technology to be in compliance with local rules, particularly around data and cybersecurity. So, there's several examples with countries in Asia where you need to have data separated. It can't be commingled, and data centers need to be onshore rather than in other parts of the region. So you must stay in compliance. Or there's so much risk there if you're not. And as we've talked about, the workforce must evolve, right? So you need to continue to allow employees to develop new skills, upskilling, reskilling, in order to keep up with the technology evolution. And it's not just a one and done, it has to be continuous. So not just when a new colleague joins or at one point in time, but it needs to be ongoing and continuous. Okay, I like this. We get to go back and forth a little bit. Craig, what are the best ways companies can help their people become more resilient and ready for the change we've just been describing?
Well, I think you said skills. I think we're seeing many organizations have been on this journey for some time, but really moving to a skills-based model as opposed to a career ladder or hierarchy model within the organization. And that hierarchy or skills ladder has served many organizations for many years. I think the change now, the difference now, is the pace at which roles are changing. So obviously AI is going to have an exponential impact on that, but roles have been changing quite dramatically for some time. So having an organization not only that helps its employees learn and work in a broader ecosystem, allowing them more job opportunities, but also obviously provides the organization with a much more agile workforce, the ability to hire from within and not necessarily have to hire externally. So I think skills absolutely incredibly important. Employee well-being is a critical aspect of talent development within an organization, and obviously a duty of care that organizations are increasingly investing in. The recognition of mental health and the role that the organization has to play within within that ecosystem. And obviously flexible work options continue to be valued by colleagues, and I'll maybe touch on that in a bit. I would also just touch on pay transparency. Regulation has been driving pay transparency and pay equity, particularly in the EU and maybe a bit closer to the region, Australia and Japan, as a couple of countries that have driven some regulation around this, and we're seeing a bit more of that coming. But I think being open to pay and opportunities, really making fairness a priority for organizations is differentiating them from a talent perspective. And then I think, as we've discussed, but continuing to use data, there is an increasing amount of data out there. There's an increasing opportunity to leverage that data and understand workforce trends, which will help organizations plan for the future.
I love what you touched on. I want to just hit it again, which is around how colleagues are most productive. And what we've found is that when you consider physical, mental, and financial well-being, and colleagues are able to come as their true selves, their productivity and capability skyrockets. So it's really critical, and what organizations are finding now, that a greater focus on well-being is impacting the productivity, right?
Absolutely agree.
So we talked about employee well-being, but employees also have very high expectations, and what we have seen throughout the region and really globally is that employee expectations are increasing everywhere. So what have you seen regarding local companies and leading companies in Asia, how are they balancing these employee expectations with the need to control costs and stay productive?
Yeah, so I just sort of caveat this with, I think we saw an increasing level of expectation following the pandemic in terms of flexibility of employees, but also as we have another generation entered the workforce. So, significant changes in terms of expectations. What we do see, though, from the research is personalized benefits and rewards have a direct link on employee engagement. So top organizations that have got really high employee engagement have a high correlation of personalized benefits and rewards. So, really supporting individuals within organizations. I spoke about data, predictive analytics becoming more and more prolific. These are really helping organizations understand the challenges, the skills gaps that they are yet to face, and obviously understanding then things like employee turnover, all of this before they happen. So really allowing organizations to be able to look into the future, see around corners effectively, and effectively have a malleable workforce to be able to change and adapt to that environment. I think flexible work models we touched on. The remote working, gig working, they are increasingly valued in our research and the surveys. What we would also note that is in Asia Pacific, in the last 3 or 4 months or so, we've seen an increase in office attendance, particularly where organizations are office bound. So there is a slight shift there. And then I would also just say, you touched on the word transformation earlier, and workforce engagement transformation, critical given the amount of change that we're experiencing. We are seeing HR organizations invest more in transformation roles within their HR units within organizations. So, just seeing that as much more of a long-term investment for the future, so that organization can remain relevant.
It's interesting. I would love to hit again the first point that you made. When you think about workforce in many countries around the world, you can have 4 or 5 different generations of employees, and so the priorities differ very much. So when you talk about those benefit packages, it's also from an insurance perspective, health, but also retirement, and how they balance those importance between the generations, and also whether it's flexibility, as you referred to, and holiday, et cetera. So it's very interesting how companies need to balance the differences.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot to take on, and I think generationally we've seen a difference in opinion, a difference in view in some of these benefits. But the reality is the colleagues that are entering the workforce are those that value them, and we need to be able to flex across all of those generations. Yeah.
Along with in office, right, where we're seeing, as you mentioned, a lot of it's around collaboration and learning. We often talk about putting the we before the me, as you're in apprentice-based models and learning from seniors in the organization. It's critical for them to be in office so you can collaborate and learn as a new joiner.
And we see a huge array of of office attendance around the region, globally as well. I think Korea, there's quite a high level of office attendance, not so much in the city of Sydney, and a little bit in Singapore as well.
Yes, very interesting.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, we spoke a bit about the weather earlier, and referenced how this is a huge threat, climate change. And volatility, of course, that comes from that. So maybe, Anne, with more extreme weather events, how are companies planning for these risks? And maybe just for the audience, what are some of the practical steps that they're taking to be able to manage and mitigate?
Sure. Well, companies, but also countries, are using advanced models to predict better and plan for these natural disasters. So the weather, they're relying more heavily on modeling to understand what is going to be impacting them from a natural disasters perspective. And it's allowing these companies to make better decisions around investments. So how they improve capital allocation, particularly regarding lending and development when you're thinking about properties, so where it makes most sense to build infrastructure and or lend if it's a financial institution. Then also for companies, they're just making smarter decisions about building infrastructure to reduce risk. We spoke earlier around cyber and transferring risk from a cyber perspective, but also from a property perspective. Companies are transferring more risk through traditional insurance products and alternative types of risk financing. We often refer to it as parametric risk financing, and these solutions are different and in some ways more nimble than traditional insurance products. So I love to share the example of a Filipino energy company with whom we work. It's a great example of how they used this cutting edge transfer risk solution. And they had a typhoon that ripped through the country, and it took out critical infrastructure as a result. And they had purchased a parametric solution that had a trigger around storm surge. And so this is really a binary trigger for this solution, and it was triggered. And what was so helpful to the company, but also the country, was that the contract paid in 8 working days. That is extraordinarily quick. And so it allowed the company to help work quickly to get the grid up and running very quickly, as I said. When you think about traditional insurance, it's a little bit different in its structure, and what it requires is a proof of loss and proof that there's damage rather than this binary trigger that I referred to earlier. And often in areas of natural disaster, it's difficult to get in to make that proof of loss for the insurance company, so payments could take months or years. I'd also love to just share one example about how Aon's been helping create weather-related risk transfer solutions for a humanitarian organization. So Aon partnered with the International Federation of the Red Cross to launch its first ever insurance policy for humanitarian relief in the sector. So for those of you familiar with the Red Cross will know that its mission is to really run toward volatility and to risk. And so we're really proud that the way in which this product has supported their disaster response emergency fund, and in 2024 alone was able to help the Red Cross reach 1.5 billion people across 13 countries and 4 continents. So utilizing risk transfer and an insurance capital to help support more people in need. So very, very pleased and proud to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I think we do expect to see more application of that and that alternative form of capital to enter, to enter those environments as well. So just thinking about climate, you mentioned on your slide you mentioned the word endemic, not episodic anymore. So if we think of it as climate as systemic, what's the intersection perhaps of weather and trade? We've spoken about trade a lot today. That companies need to consider as these two megatrends kind of combine force?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to be short and sharp on this one. So it's very clear that extreme weather can disrupt shipping routes and supply chains, which will lead to delays and losses for business, losses of cargo because of spoilage, and there are many examples. I think most recently, two examples pop to mind. Droughts in Central America impacted flows through the Panama Canal, right? So it slowed the process for shipping and supply chains. And then also when you think about the wildfires in Los Angeles and in Southern California, it slowed port operations because of reduced workforce availability. So many people were impacted personally by the wildfires that it prevented them from going to work and operating the port, so it impacted supply there. So this is why so many companies are looking to diversify their supply chain. All right, Craig, back to you, if I may. Can you please give an example of how a decision in one area, like technology, affected other parts of a business, such as the workforce or supply chain?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on this, but obviously the adoption of AI, new technology, can change job roles, but it also requires new compliance measures, and obviously increases cybersecurity. So you can see how those two come together. I would say in a recent Aon employee sentiment survey, 64% of entry-level employees report uncertainty in the role in which they're entering the workforce. So that reflects widespread apprehension around the current state as organizations make this shift into adopting this technology. And over the course of the last couple of days, yesterday in particular, I saw a number of students in the main hall, and I was wondering how they're thinking about this as they're about to enter the workforce and have heard so much about this evolution, that's great transition that's taking place. And I would just say climate strategies as well can influence where companies build factories. So it can make decisions. We're doing a lot of financial modeling for organizations based on 20, 30-year climate projections, and they're making decisions on where they invest in their assets, but also financial institutions in terms of how they underwrite their mortgage portfolio for the future, as an example, what insurance they need, what talent they need to hire. And then trade policies can obviously shape technology choices, and you touched on this around data security as well. I think the point around this is that all of these risks are interconnected, and so therefore the solutions and the way in which we think about tracking the path forward needs to be an integrated one. Great. Well, thank you. So we really do have the last question here, and we're about to run out of time. So, Anne, this is my question to you. I think, what gives you optimism that we're going to be able to navigate this future?
Yes, well, I'm optimistic and bullish even because leaders are increasingly recognizing that resilience is a competitive advantage in times of volatility, and they're utilizing modeling to improve their management and leadership decisions. They're more aware of risks in order to make their organizations stronger, and we've talked at length about utilization of technology in a positive way and making sure that the employees in the workforce are prepared by upskilling and reskilling so that they can really make a difference utilizing this technology. So I'm very optimistic and I'm very bullish, and I am deeply grateful for each and every one of you and your participation today as we've discussed this complex world and the risk landscape. So thank you very much for your time and participation.
Thank you.